Hello, beautiful visionaries. This is Lorna Lee. I'm so honored today to bring to you Elayne Kalila Doughty. Kalila has been on a path of passionate service for the past 20 years. She is an ordained priestess and the founder of the Priestess Presence Temple, a dedicated temple of the 13 Moon Mystery School, which initiates women into the ancient mysteries of the divine feminine in a modern context. Through embodiment practices and devoted service, the temple inspires women to unleash their leadership gifts and step into their full potential. Kalila will share with us today what it truly takes to grow a global sisterhood of magical priestesses and what it's like to create a mystery school that shares esoteric teachings online. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kalila.
Welcome. It's wonderful to be here with you.
So I would love to understand, what exactly do you help your students resolve? What specific problem do you address that your Priestess Presence Temple helps your priestess students be able to resolve and then transform?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that the majority of women who come into the mystery school are seeking to connect with a deeper sense of authenticity and connection to what we could call our essence, and in other circles would be called the soul, or be called your true self, the part of you that lives deep down inside, that when we become socialized in our families and our cultures and through our life experience and journey, we learn to develop strategies and masks and personas, right? Ways of appearing in the world that are not always aligned with who we actually are. And this is kind of the behest of psychology. And I started my life in the psychology world. I was a psychologist. I was a psychotherapist for many, many years. And so I've always been really fascinated about how do we help people transform, to become connected to their joy, to their sense of purpose, to their sense of who they are on the planet, and being able to be of service within that. And so the mystery school takes what used to be a psychological conversation for me down into a very holistic conversation where we're really talking to the mind, the body, and the soul of the being, and taking women through a process whereby they travel through the landscapes of many different archetypal faces of the feminine to come to know themselves more fully, to become more fully embodied and more fluidly embodied in every aspect of their own gifts, of their own unique talents, and are really supported to bring that into the world. And one of the things I love most about this work is witnessing women walking in as, one being, and then walking out as a very different being at the other end of it, and really beginning to affect change in their own communities, in their own work in the world, and having not just the confidence, but the what would I say, the access really to a sense of deep support and a sense of connection to the greater self, the what I might call the mythic self that is really at play here. And so it's an amazing process, right? And I think that's why many of us are called into this world of the transformation, is because it's very exciting. Because as we watch people transform, we are transformed. And so there's a symbiotic relationship for me with being in the temple. It's not just a business. It's really a relationship with my own evolution that comes through this guise of the Priestess Presence Temple and the community that's gotten built there.
Do you have a global vision for the Priestess Temple? If so,
yes.
What is that?
I do, and it's a new one that's just began to emerge. So this coming year, one of the things that the community has been asking for is more intimacy, because we're an online temple, right? And the one thing that an online temple doesn't have is the in-person touch sight feeling, right? And the online world is very, very powerful, but there's still such great power to us gathering in person. And so what we're launching next year, and the vision that I have is we're launching something called the Priestess Presence Temple Guide Training, where we're going to be training women on how to set up temple communities within their own homes, within their own environments. And my vision is within the next 5 years to facilitate sisters in setting up those temples. And I'd love to see, 1,000 temples set up over the planet and really have this sense of sisterhood be happening in local communities. So that vision is to bring these temples into people's homes, into their local communities, into, wherever they're gathering, and to bring together men and women so that we can be together in a sacred space and learn what that means to be with one another. So I do. That's a new vision that's just arisen really this year, and I'm really clear that that's part of this grassroots piece of the Priestess Presence Temple that's so important to me personally.
I love that vision. I love to imagine that the sacred feminine is rising, especially what we've been witnessing in the world these days, socially, politically, culturally. I feel like it's just the energy, the Shakti is just kind of like about to be unleashed. So thank you for playing a part in catalyzing the rise of the sacred feminine.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, what are the different kinds of programs that you offer in your school? Like, how does if one wished to create a mystery school? I have a friend that she'd often spoke to me about wanting to create a wizard school. And so I would think about you, and it's like, yeah, well, there's a lot of schools that do exist that are like that. So, but how does one go about really creating that?
By accident. I didn't set out. I when I first set out with the Priestess Presence Temple, I had no idea what I was really being called to. I just knew that I needed to create this space, and I was given this name, Priestess Presence. And at the time, I didn't even really know what that meant either. I was just following the cues that I was receiving as to how I could best serve in the world. So retroactively now, it's 5 years ago that I began the Priestess Presence Temple. So what I can tell you now is very, very different than what I knew when I stepped in. And I think that's really important for everybody who's listening, no matter where you are on the path, is having a sacred business to me means being willing to sit with the unknown. It means being willing to not always have everything clear. It means being willing to interact with the mystery, right? If I am here intending to set up an online mystery school, then I've got to understand and be willing to know that I'm going to be stepping into the mystery and creating that, right? You can't be outside of that process. And so that's part of what I believe a sacred business really is it's a sacred business is defined by the fact that we are bringing our whole heart and soul into the offerings that we bring to the world, and that we are transformed by those offerings as much as those who we seek to transform. And there's a symbiotic relationship there. And if you're not up for that journey, then perhaps you should not do this, because you will be changed by this, and you will be deeply initiated and challenged by this journey. So all of that said, what I know now is that if you want to build anything in the online world, you have to make a journey, for me, of how people can come from a first gateway of entering into your work to deepening in their understanding and their interest, to the point where they might participate in something that's a deeper offering. There has to be a guided process, because most of us who are interested in transformation are interested in the deeper work. For me, my deep love is very esoteric, and it's not the kind of stuff that you can really translate into everyday, normalized speech, although I do my best to make those bridges. So what I have learned is that what is the entry point that someone is going to come into this work at? How are you going to help them to understand where they are on the path, whatever your path is? And then what is the pathway? And the pathway could be 2 or 3 different offerings. It could be something that's free, and then something that's a low priced offering, and then something that's a little higher priced offering, or maybe one-on-one work. But there has to be what in the industry they call a funnel. Well, it's like if you imagine water, right, and water is flowing. Well, if water isn't held by the banks of a river, water will just seep into the ground and go feed whatever it wants to feed, which is a beautiful metaphor. But if we want to direct where that water is going to go, then we have to put banks, and we have to put the water into a flow, right? Well, the same is true within your sacred business. You have to come up with ways in which to flow those who might be interested through the materials, through the amazing offerings that you have. You have to build some architecture for them to be able to find their way. And that really is the underpinning. You can have great content. You can have great processes to take people through. But if people don't have a way to come to you, they're not going to come to you, because people like to be helped to navigate things. And that's something I've had to learn, because I'm not necessarily somebody who is a linear thinker at all. And so for me, I've had to really stretch the muscles of how do I do this in a creative way? How do I do this in a way that matches the nature of the temple? Right? And that's the other thing that's really important is if you're choosing to do mystery school work, or work that's more esoteric, or work that's more transformational, you don't want to compromise the depth of the work that you're doing, right? You want this, whatever structures that are in place in your business, to match that in some way, to be resonant with that. And so you want to, that's a big part of thinking about, well, how do I want people to feel the moment that they come into the Priestess Presence Temple? And this is what I talk about with my team, is that how do we want a woman to feel the moment she walks in the door? And then how do we want to talk to her? And how do we want to nurture a relationship with her? And then how do we want to invite her? Mm-hmm. I'm big on invitation. Mm-hmm. I don't talk about selling people. I talk about inviting them, because really, and this is an interesting piece, right? I have nothing to sell, ... I want to sit with that for a moment. I really don't, because what I'm offering is a place. I'm inviting you into an experience that will transform you. But within that experience, everything that I'm speaking, other people are speaking too. It's not like I own the word priestess, or I own the mystery school, or the hermetic sciences, or, I don't. I just have my particular lens on how I've interpreted that and brought it together as a system. And that's what any of us have. Is we're all having access to the same freaking thing in the end. It's how we put it together. Mm-hmm. And truly, I came to the notion very, very early on was, yes, I'm a business, and therefore we sell things. But ultimately, we are a temple that is inviting you into a process of growth and transformation. And this is a place where you can come to be held in that process. And that is in every part of our messaging, because that's what's real. That's what's true. I'm not going to give you a physical product. It's an experience. And that's a very different thing when we're creating experiences. And it's not like, oh, you don't get handouts and workbooks and, all the things that we've created to try to ground the experience. But truly, you're here to move through a transformation. There's a growth or an evolution that people are seeking. And so it's very fascinating to speak about how to make that into a viable business, right? Which is why we're here. Yes.
I love how you've really curated that experience so well, with the way that your team communicates with me, the words that they use, to the temple-like experience of entering your free sacred library that's full of content. I just I show people, in my community and in my company, I'm like, look at this. She's done such a great job with exactly what makes her ideal students feel comfortable and at home.
Right.
So I'm curious to know, because this question comes up a lot in business, especially in educational businesses, which is, you speak of different offerings, you speak of gateways. And I think for a lot of people to try to understand What gateway do you focus on first? Do you focus on the lower cost experiences, in which you have to reach a lot more people in order to be able to, generate the revenue to keep everything running and your team paid and, everyone living well, versus something that looks more like a deeper, more intimate experience that has a higher investment, that requires, more of your, time and energy, but at the end of the day, you don't need to reach as many people. What did you find was most successful in growing your business? And I say this because I see a lot of people focus on, the $97, online product first, and then they don't realize like how much, traffic, how many people they have to reach in order to present that offer to them.
So, well, I think it starts with backing up a little bit to ask what the mission is that you have, because I think that, the ultimate mission of your business, of your sacred business, is the guiding post, right? The decisions that you're going to make in terms of why are you here and why are you doing what you're doing and what's the impact that you're intending to have in the world. So, and I think a sacred business can have different missions at different times of its evolution. So when I first started the Priestess Presence Temple, my intention was to create a space which turned no one away, no woman away for lack of money. So we have lots of free offerings, because it was really, really important for me to address the issue of equity and access and privilege on that level of finances. And a lot of that was to do with my own history, right? Of being somebody who, had come from a background with not a lot of money. And I was very, very privileged to receive the education that I received. And I'm aware of that. And so for me, that was always a baseline for the temple, plus the fact it's a spiritual organization. In other words, we are here as a temple. In other words, when people step into the space, I want them to feel welcomed as if they're stepping into a temple, which comes down to, as you said, Lorna, everything to do with the language that we speak and the way in which we greet people and the way in which we nurture and the way in which we involve, right? And so within that, from that viewpoint, right, it's important for me to create ways and means for women to come in that are really easy yeses for them. So we have concentrated on creating a lot of content that is available on, what we call a pay what you can heart contribution. We have packages that go out every month where you can deepen into the mystery, and we have 3 price points, and I leave it up to you to pay what you can. And the reason I do that is because I really, truly want to spread these ideas into the world. And I don't want money to be in the way of these ideas, these concepts, these really useful processes and techniques and things that people can do to have access to that. So that's one level. Now, you need to sell a lot of $11 products to make any money. So I'm really aware that that's not going to sustain the temple. That's like the cherry on top, right? That's just a little extra that comes in. But its mission is to, now this is really important, is to give people a way to step in that's easy and a yes. And once people have stepped in and they have bought something from the temple, they've given a heart contribution to the temple, they begin to have a relationship with the temple and with me, right? And then that's nurtured. And they may never, ever heart contribute to anything else. That's okay. But they may. They may be somebody who comes in on one of those offerings and then ends up in one of the deeper programs. And what I've learned over the years is that it's all about relationship. It's all about nurturing relationships with people. The people who are going to step into the deeper level offerings with you likely are not going to do it on the first instance of meeting you. Some are, but most of them are not. Most of them are going to want to hang around you for a while and see if you're trustworthy, see if they really like what you're saying, see if you seem like you have integrity, build a relationship. And this is where the feminine comes in, right? Because the feminine is all about interconnectedness and relationship. And so for me, I know all the women who are in my deeper programs. I've spent time around them. I've seen them, coming through the temple. There's an actual sense of sisterhood, and that to me is really important because that's what I'm wanting to create. I'm not here to just make money. And that's really what makes a difference between a sacred business and a business. The definition of business is about transactions that make money. That's what a business is. A sacred business is about transactions and making money in service to a mission, which is a little bit like a hybrid between a traditional business and a nonprofit, right? And we've got all these different ideas about how to structure business these days. But there's a mission underneath the business that isn't driven by money. And that's, I think, what defines for me a sacred business, or in corporate language, it would be a B Corp, or, more of a sustainable business or a social business. I've got all these terms. So truthfully, I have, you can pay as little as $3 and get, be involved in something in the temple. And we have a lot of higher end, deeper end offers that we offer and nurture our community towards being interested in. For example, we're just about to open up enrollment for our year-long training that starts in January. And that's a higher end ticket. It's not huge, but it's a higher end contribution. But it's a year worth of, being in the mystery school, being an initiate in the mystery school. And what I'm noticing this year, and this is part of being around for a little while too, is that women know that this is happening, right, in the community. And women, so we're not having to, we will do a launch, but we're not having to do that. People are already approaching us and saying, I really want to do this year. Can I already sign up? When's the date? And that's a beautiful place to be in, right? Is that you are having your community coming to you and saying, yes, I've been thinking about this and I want to do it this year. And, so there's a way in which, no one way is right, but you have to think about what you want to be doing with your business. And for some people, you're going to want to really focus on a smaller list, a smaller group of people, and a deeper, higher end offers. And that's one aspect. We have that aspect, but we are kind of a hybrid company in some ways, in the sense that we've built this big infrastructure. And there's also a place where I'm evolving as a sacred business leader. And, you're never going to be saying the same either, because you're going to be changed by the experience. So your sacred business is going to grow in relationship to where you are, where your team is, and where your community is. And that is a relationship, right? And so there isn't a one size fits all. And what I've really learned is there's not a formula. There's loads of formulas out there, and they can be useful, but there really isn't a formula. And things in the online world change like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll build it, and it will be defunct by the time you've built it. And that is something you have to get used to in the online world. It moves very, very fast. And what was working last year won't work this year. So when you build it going, I'm going to use this again, you'll get to this year and you'll have to revamp it because it doesn't quite stand, because things have shifted. And that is difficult. That's a difficult aspect of navigating this world.
Mm-hmm.
But it keeps you on your toes.
It does. It definitely keeps you on your toes. I remember, the whole process of building up a, very large Facebook page that could reach tons of people. That has totally just disappeared. Everyone that I know that has a massive page, they're not getting nearly enough, as much reach as they were in the past. And then, of course, the whole, even being able to grow your email tribe, being able to reach people in such a cluttered environment of too much information, it can be really challenging. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know, in terms of how you've been able to grow such a large online community, what did you find were the strategies that worked best?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say this, Lorna, because I think that there's strategies that did work best, and I'm not sure that they're the ones that work anymore, like you just said, right? So I think this is where I'm going to sort of presence this. I think this is where we're in the mystery of a world where we're really being asked to connect with what's real and true and authentic for us. because a strategy is only as good as its connection to the truth of who you are. Because if the strategy isn't serving the real truth of where you are, then it just becomes a thing.
Or a grueling, tiresome task.
And also it becomes something you think you should be doing because that's the way that quote unquote people are doing it, but it's not really your joy and it's not really connected to your heart. So I had a lot of people in the beginning. So we grew a very big Facebook community very quickly over a very few amount of years, partly because we were at the beginning of a curve. When we first started Priestess Presence, the word priestess wasn't really in the collective vernacular. It was a word that people were still not understanding. And so there was a way in which we were one of the first online spaces that was speaking about priestessing. And so we grew very, very quickly, right? And we also did a lot to grow. We did a lot of Facebook advertising. We did a lot of, background work with our community. We did a lot of surveying. We did a lot of talking to our community. And I still do that part, the surveying, and we can talk about that more because that's really one of the things that I think is most important, is having a dialogue with those people that you're seeking to serve and actually asking them questions. But that is part of what grew us. Then also what we developed pretty early on, because this is about getting information out there, but we developed a whole bunch of quizzes. And quizzes are people love to take quizzes. I love to take quizzes. I mean, they're just fun, right? And because I work in the world of archetypal psychology and archetypal spirituality, there's a way in which that lends itself very beautifully to an assessment or a quiz, because it's typing, right? It's about, okay, do you have aspects of the Great Mother or aspects of the Goddess of Compassion or aspects of the Primal Goddess, right? What are those? And people love to learn that stuff. And it's useful because it acts as a gateway for people to find out things about themselves that they might otherwise not have known. And that's a lot of what my work in the world is I'm wanting to have you be fully embodied, especially in the aspects of yourself that you're scared to embody because they might be too much or whatever the version is that we're holding in ourselves. My greatest joy is to see you in your full, bright, vibrant colors, being as flamboyant, eccentric, quiet, nerdy, beautiful as you are, right? And that is that really is the kid in me, which is always what it comes down to for me, is that's what she wants to do. She wants to play with people in that realm. And so everything has to serve that, right? Everything has to serve that. And so you've got to look at what are the strategies that most serve the thing that you're wanting to gift people with. Because I always bring it back down to, if we think about strategy as being the ego, right? And, synonymous with ego, but the essence is our true self, and the essence of your company or your business, your sacred business, is your transformational juju, right? The special gorgeousness that you bring to the work. Then you have to have the ego or the strategy be in service to that. So and this is what's really, really tricky. And you're not always going to be on point with this. And that's part of the journey too. So, I've gone running down certain tracks going, oh, this is a great way to do the business. And then I've gotten halfway down the track and gone, oh no, I don't like this at all. This is not working for me. But you don't know until you go down there. And that's part of the journey of learning, right? And right now, I'm in an evolution with the Priestess Presence Temple because developmentally it's 5 years old. It's going to kindergarten. I'm not meant to be full-time caring for this business at this point. I'm meant to be letting other people, right? This is an evolution of anything. And so within that, we're looking again at, well, what's the strategy that we want to use? What makes sense? And so actually this next year, we've grown and grown and grown and grown. And this next year, I'm actually going to just focus on that one program I spoke about, which is the vision of temples in every community. Mm-hmm. That's the main focus. And the rest of the programs are just going to run as they are. I'm not going to create anything else new. Now, we'll see if I hold to that. OCD, which is over creativity disorder.
I understand completely.
Any entrepreneurs. And that's one of the things I would say is I have been absolutely prone to creating. I have so much content. We have so much content. And I know there are others who struggle with making content, but really, truly, the secret is to make things that can be repurposed. I'm going to say it one more time. If you make something, if you create something, if you pour your lifeblood into something, make sure that it can be reutilized. And this was something in the first 2 or 3 years of Priestess Presence, I was very, for want of a better word, snobby. Because I was very, very attached to the idea that I wanted people to have a live temple experience, and there wasn't a way that you could repeat that, and you couldn't really record that, and you had to be there, right? And I was very attached to that idea. And there is truth to that. But guess what? I've had to go back and evergreen all of those things that I made. And to some degree, I haven't done any of that because it takes so much time to do that. You know, so when you record something, this would be my magic tip. If you record content, make sure that you record it in such a way that you can use it again and again and again, and repackage it and re-offer it and give it away as gifts. Make sure you use it, because otherwise that is your energy, which is basically the same as your money, right? Tied up in something that isn't then going to be able to serve your business. And so that's been a big learning for me along the way. And now my team laughs with me, because now I'm always like, well, we're going to repurpose this. But it's been so beautiful, because the truth of the matter is actually the community really likes to hear things more than once. And this is a learning, right? A learning thing, which is, who knows anything about learning structures and education, if you want people to start to grok things, they have to hear it 5, 6, 7 times in different ways, slightly different skew, but on the same thing. And then they'll begin to build a language and an understanding. So you want to think about that in your business. Is what's the core thing that you're wanting people to actually learn about? Like for me, it's like developing what might be called a signature system, whereby essentially, and that's what a signature system, and I want to just honor my sister, Melissa Seaman, who is a brilliant business coach and strategist. And she helped me with this very simply. But the steps that she come up with is basically, what do you do with every single person when you sit with them as a client? What are the things that you first say to them? What is the process that you always end up taking people through? Write it down. What are the things that you tell people over and over again? Write those down. And as you begin to write this down, you'll see that you have a system. It may not be conscious, but you have a system that you have developed out of everything that you've learned and integrated. And you need to know what that system is, because once you can tell people what that system is, people will then understand what they're stepping into with you. And that's really important in esoteric work, for sure. Because you want to be able to help people understand, how is this going to benefit me?
So for those of us in the audience who are wishing to create their signature system, and this is definitely something that is, appealing, like deeply appealing, and also, a shining, guiding light that many healers are, trying to get to, which is figuring out how to, basically create a framework for transformation that through which their gifts can be expressed. And and so if they were to go about doing that, one of the challenges that many sacred service professionals have is, there's the process of creating the system is one thing, and one can definitely get very involved in the creation of that content, and that creation of the content can take, a long time even to finally complete. And so how does one go about filling that program? What would your advice be on the best ways to attract as many of the ideal students or clients for that program, to experience it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think it first and foremost goes back to, if you already have a community, in other words, if you've already started to build a community, it doesn't need to be a big community. It can be a small community. Like, I say this to people all the time. It doesn't have to be like, I think Priestess Presence is 80,000 women at this point. It doesn't have to be that, right? And I had no idea that that's how big Priestess Presence was going to evolve to be. And that's got its own headaches, by the way. I'll be honest with you. right? When, so scaling back from that, I want to go back to something I shared earlier on that is a vehicle that personally I love, which is when I have a question about what to create, I do three things. One is I start to listen. Mm-hmm. And I start to look at what is in the cultural trend, what is happening in our world, what is it that I can contribute, or the Priestess Presence can contribute towards that conversation. And there's a lot going on in our world right now that people are really, really knocked off about, right? So there's a lot of material to do with the shadow, to do with how do we live in this world, to do with how do we navigate through this together, how do we dream into something else, right? So there's all this stuff. So first of all, I start listening to what is it that's emerging from the collective. I then go to my little fractal of the collective and I ask some questions. And I just sent a survey out and I said, hey, what are you most struggling with right now? What is the biggest challenge that you're having? What do you think about the modern day priestess and who she is? How do you see yourself serving in your community? What is the biggest area that you're needing to grow in? What's the vision that you're holding? Mm-hmm. Examples of some questions, right? Mm-hmm. Wait to get, something back. And when I get the questions back, I have a system where you put all the information into a chart and I go through it. Mm-hmm. And I look at all those responses and I see what is it that my community is saying they need help with. And then I sit and I meditate on, well, what would be the content from this perspective that I might offer that could help some of that. Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Mm-hmm. Don't create stuff without first asking the people that you're creating it for if it's what they want.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. I think another thing too that comes up as well is, I find that a lot of the people that answer surveys don't necessarily buy the thing that you create. So then at a certain point, I feel that sometimes it's necessary to attract people from other places outside your community as well.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. I mean, actually, you've invited me to speak on this summit, right? And I said yes, because I've spoken to you before and I liked what you did before. And this brings in new exposure of people who aren't already in my community to my community, right? So there's also other ways in which I choose to do outreach in certain ways, right? Mm-hmm. And the main way for me is I align myself with those who are in the industry, who I feel are integrous and who I feel are putting out a message that I'm aligned with. And oftentimes I will speak for free and we'll, do this whole thing. And part of that is exposure, right, to people who don't already know the Priestess Presence Temple and who might be interested and curious and come over as potential, clients, as potential sisters in the temple. And that happens a lot. I get a lot of women who come from other things that they've seen me speak on years ago. They'll say, I saw you speak on this. I'm like, I don't even remember speaking on that. Okay.
So going out to speak is your preferred method?
It is for me. It is for me. Yeah. That's my comfort zone. And that's where you have to think about, well, what do you like? For me, I'm a speaker. I'm not so much a writer. Mm-hmm. I'm a speaker. That's my nature. And so for me to sit and speak is very natural. And, for others, it could be more about writing and offering things in the written form, like doing a podcast or doing a blog where you really get that out there into the world, right? Or writing a book or, there are so many different ways. But what I want to say to you all is that there is no one way mm-hmm. of attracting people to come to your business. Now, whatever size business, sacred business you have, I think you have to start with, what is it that I'm really wanting people to experience? And then having a conversation about that. Because one of the things that I think is so, so difficult, and this is something I had to learn over a number of years. And as I said, prior to the Priestess Presence Temple, I was in private practice as a psychotherapist for many, many years, for like 15, 16 years. And so I was used to running a business, right? I was used to running a business whereby it was based upon client attraction. It was based on people needing to come. And in a private practice, if that's your model, if you really want to just work one-on-one, then what I can say to you is it's referral. It's the referral. I never, ever advertised as a therapist. I never did anything. I just did the work with the people, and the people bought the people. And I had full practice, and I had 5 interns working with me, and they were full also, because it was all on word of mouth. And you have a niche, and you understand what your niche is. And for me, my niche was, I worked with trauma, and I worked with couples, and I ended up with a very full practice of working with couples. That was my main area. And I loved that work. I loved it for the period of time that I was doing it. But can you feel how the difference of that when it's a one-on-one in-person situation, and versus a very big business where you've got a lot of reach? Now, I'll say something else is, ultimately, the people who come into the higher end programs come through referral. They know somebody who's been in something that I've run. And that is why case studies and testimonials and having your community who love your work, your fans, the ones who are absolutely committed, even if there's only 3 of them, doesn't matter how many there are, you want to get them talking about it with you, and you want to share that in every which way you can. Yes, because that's, if you're honest, right? How do you, this is why, you know, on Yelp, on Airbnb, on all these sites where it's based upon customer review, right? TripAdvisor, all customer review. What do you do when you want to find somewhere you want to go? You don't look at what the place itself says about itself. You look at about what everyone else says about it, right? And that's how you decide. That's how I decide. Whenever I want to find something, dentist, doctor, hairdresser, you name it, I'm going to ask my circle of sisters who I trust, who I understand are like me, right? Where do you go? Who do you go to see? So that is the same inside the online world. It's the same thing. So again, it comes down to that golden thing for me, which is relationship. You know, and that's been my way in, has been through relationship and building those relationships. And there's a lot of loyalty in the Priestess Presence Temple, as there is in any sacred business, because if you make people actually, if you actually involve them in the process and have them be invested in it and have them want to be part of this growing, beautiful community, then you've got your allies right there. So, yeah.
I think one of the big questions that comes up for many people is, you know, at what size does your, you know, your ideal tribe need to be before you start to see results, you start to see, you know, traction? Because I think there's a certain point for many people where they're, you know, they're wishing to serve more people and they're not showing up, you know, versus like having a really big audience, and, you know, and then there's like a lot of noise. Is there a place, you know, with it, like a critical mass where, you know, it's like, I've got 80,000 people now, we're 30,000 people, and I don't have to worry about, like, you know, bringing more people in from other places through referrals, through Facebook ads. I can just, you know, promote my programs and products and services to those 80,000 people? Or is there always a need to, you know, bring in new people into your world?
Great question. I think it's a bit of a both and. I do think it's a bit of a both and. And I think, again, it comes down to what kind of sacred business you want to be running. And I think, I think that this is a great question to ask yourself as you're building the structures to hold whatever it is that you create. Is, are you interested in having a smaller community? Are you interested in having a larger community? Like, what are your motivations? What are you intending? And to really hone that down, to really, you know, drill down with that a little bit in yourself, because what I will say is it takes a lot of energy to run a big business. And I know you've got Stephen Dinan coming on. He's got a huge entity, way bigger than Priestess Presence even, you know, but it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of servicing, and it takes a lot of revenue.
Yes, I know. I envision growing Entheo Nation to be like a Shift network, but with more edgier content that Shift network doesn't publish. That's my vision.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing how big that is.
Yeah, and it's and you know that takes a lot. There's a lot of learning curves in there. There's a lot of learning curves in there, Lorna. And I never set out to be a business person, and I think this is probably true for many of us. Like I wasn't like woohoo, I want to be a business person. I've had to learn how to run and structure a business, and I'm still learning how to run and structure a business. And I don't think I'll ever end. In order to fulfill on my mission. And I think that's a lot of us are mission driven, right? I'm mission driven. I'm not profit driven, but I have to pay attention to that part of the business. Otherwise there won't be any temple. And that's been a big lesson for me too. Yeah. And, you know, and so I think it's like everything else, I think we have to be adaptive, and I think we have to be listening, and I think we have to be tuned in, and I think we have to be willing to learn from the places that no longer work, and be willing to let go of things and restructure and not be scared of all of that. You know, it's never going, you're never going to land on the one thing and say, oh, well, this is it. And that's just successful, rinse and repeat forever, because you're in the industry of transformation. Think about it. You're in the business of evolution. Think about it for a moment. So everything that you're creating is going to have to evolve alongside you and the community you're holding. So it's kind of, that's crazy making, right? Because then you're like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Now, what I can say within that is that the structure of the mystery school itself, we're in the fifth year of running this program, and we've been honing it over 5 years, and now it can run itself. I mean, I'm still teaching it, but the background stuff is all done, right? The structure is all there. We're not changing. That's not changing. We add to it, you know, so there's different curriculums that come out because there's people who've been through. And for me, the sign of success is that I think this year we had about a 45% uptake from the people who've been in the program last year. 45% of them are repeating next year.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Right. So that's also something for you to think about, is if you want to build a school isn't about 1 year of a program. A school is about multiple years of progressing through a path. Right. So you need to be able to think about, okay, so what is the first year that everybody goes through? And then what are people's choices? Like you would if you go to university, you can do these different courses and there's different electives, and right. So that's what I've been focused on. And now what's happening is some people are in their 5th year of going through the temple. And guess what? Those sisters are the ones that I'm now training to come in and be faculty, because that's how that works, right? Because they're at the point where they've really studied this and they can start to actually share some of this within the community. And therefore we now have something that looks like much more is sustainable, because it's not all about me. So that's the other thing is when you're building the business is you begin as the center. Because you're running the business, the sacred business, but you've got to have a vision of how you can move out of being in the central role. Because believe me, after 5 years, I want a different role, you know. And every person in sacred business that I've spoken to is at this, you know, gets to this point, and you're like, no, you know, I can't do that. That's, you know, it's like having a baby. And a baby grows up to 5, and you're really happy the baby's going to kindergarten. You're like, yay! And I'm so happy to see you when you come back. But there's other people who are kind of dealing with you, right? It's the same thing. You know, there's a developmental fractal here that is universal. It's archetypal. So to come back to your original question, is there a critical mass? Is there a way? I don't think so, because I think ultimately your business is a living, breathing organism. And it is always going to be changing. It's not going to stay static. It's not going to be the same thing. And that's part of the willingness to be in the initiation of how are you being called to change and serve now that may look different last year. So that mission statement that you come up with, that can stay fundamentally the same, but how you action on that mission statement may shift. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your deep wisdom of all of this. I have so much to reflect on personally, and I'm absolutely certain that our audience has learned a lot from you and our conversation here. So thank you again for all the work that you're doing. You are such an inspiration. You've created such a beautiful online experience, and I deeply appreciate everything that you've created and how I'm learning through you. Thank you, Kalila.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'll be honest with you, thank you for creating the space, because it's interesting for me to talk about this and to be super candid with you all and just be really honest about the trials and tribulations and the joy of serving in this way. And I wouldn't, there's days when I'm like, oh, this is so much. And there are other days when I'm like, wow, this is really wild that I get to do this, and this is great, and I'm so happy that this is happening. But it is a journey. It's a journey, and I just want to honor everybody who's here and just say to you, keep coming back to the truth of who you are. Keep coming back to the integrity of who you are, what you're really committed to in the world of transformation, what your vision is for your community and the planet, and keep holding that, and then ask, how can I best, what's the best strategy? What's the best way to support this vision and this happening in the world? And have conversations, talk to your people, talk to other people who are doing this. Collaborate. We need to collaborate with one another. It's not all about, oh, I have all the secrets over here and I'm not going to share them with you because that means you would be successful. Your success is my success at this point.
Yeah.
And we need to understand, if we're going to change the paradigm, we have to change how we're being in business too. Old form business is based on competition and winning and doing the best. And that isn't the world I want to live in.
Me neither.
So there's a lot here. There's a lot here to consider about the paradigm shift that we want to create. So, we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully it'll be food for thought, and you can get into some conversations with your colleagues, with people who are in your area, who are doing similar things, and build relationships with them.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I'd love for you to quickly share with us your free gift before we hop off.
Yeah, of course. So one of the big focuses of our temple this year has been around supporting sisters to step into what we're calling the 5 phases of priestess leadership. And we developed an amazing quiz assessment, which is actually pretty deep. It's actually kind of quite soul-searching, actually. But I'd love to share with you all the link to that, to have you take that quiz to see which phase of leadership you score highest in. And then you get a free handout and a free offering that we put together for you to go a little bit deeper into that. And then there's other ways that you can come deeper into that if you're called. But it's an amazing material. And the 5 phases that we work with are the midwife, the ecstatic, the mystic, the challenger, and the shaman. And hold very different leadership gifts and leadership challenges. And the reason that we put this together this year was because we're really listening into how to give language to the unspoken gifts and talents that live within the feminine, that have not been featured as being worthy or valuable in our culture. And so we're really speaking to how to bring that forward and how to recognize what we're actually doing when we're bringing what otherwise was unspoken. So it's been really revolutionary for a lot of women. So I'm excited to share it with you. And please, go ahead and take that quiz if it feels curious to you.
Wonderful. We'll put the link below this video. And how can our audience best stay in touch with you, Kalila?
Best way to stay in touch with me is either through our Priestess Presence Facebook group, which is a big old group on Facebook, or you can just come to priestesspresence.com, and that's our home webpage, temple portal, where you can find out a whole bunch of stuff. And you can contact us there. There's a contact form right there if you want to speak to us directly.
All right. Well, thank you, Kalila. You have a beautiful day. Stay safe in Northern California. And
Blessings. Blessings, everybody. Lovely to be with you.
Bye-bye.